CityLine. With me, I have two fabulous individuals who are here to talk about one of the gems of our community, and I'm talking about Tacoma Pro Bono. So please join me in welcoming into my kitchen Laurie Davenport. She is the Director of Development and Outreach for Tacoma Pro Bono. Hello, Miss Laurie.
Hi, Amanda. Happy to be here.
And oh, it's so great to have you here. And if you watched our show last week, you got to see Laurie's lovely daughter, Kim, be on the show also. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Then with me right now on, let's see, the right side of me, I feel like I'm in a Brady Bunch screen, is Mr. Mark Morzal. You are the managing attorney for Tacoma Pierce County Housing Justice Project. Welcome, Mark. It's good to have you in my kitchen.
Thank you for having me.
So, Laurie, for people who do not know what Tacoma Pro Bono is, tell us about your organization, what you do, and who do you help?
Sure. Tacoma Pro Bono, the simplest version, provides free professional legal services from licensed attorneys for people who can't afford to hire a lawyer. And in this time we're facing right now, Governor Inslee has declared that programs like ours are a vital part of the frontline response to the pandemic, and we are ready to help. That's why we're here. So we can help anyone who's low income, who has a legal problem in Pierce County, including undocumented immigrants and refugees. So we welcome anyone who needs help to contact us.
Well said, my dear. Beautifully said. So, Mark, the other side of this is the Housing Justice Project. So what is this?
Correct. So the Housing Justice Project is a component of Tacoma Pro Bono. Housing Justice Project at its core is a homelessness prevention program. We work with low-income tenants that are facing eviction and eviction-related or housing-related issues. And those issues, eviction in particular, can have very destabilizing effects on tenants. They face immediate loss of housing, they face large money judgments, they could have evictions on their record, difficulty finding new housing. And when they do find new housing, then they're going to pay increased security deposit and increased rent. I know this is a national problem, but to put it like in local terms, 35% of Pierce County is renter occupied. That's one out of every 3 dwellings is renter occupied. When you move into the more population dense areas like Tacoma, it rises to 45%, 50% in Lakewood. And when these tenants show up for their eviction hearings, if they ever have to, 90% of them are unrepresented at their hearing, while as 90% of the landlords are represented. So it becomes a big access to justice issue, and that's what we're addressing.
I love, Mark, that you said access to justice, because that's exactly what I was thinking as I shook my head and I heard the 4-year-old inside of me say, this is not fair. So, because it's not. So let's talk about, because we see it all over the news, we see it in social media, the eviction moratorium. What is, first off, if people don't know about the eviction moratorium, and then when will it end?
Yeah, so let's be very clear when we're talking about the eviction moratorium. So what we're talking about is 2 separate proclamations that were done by Governor Inslee. First one was done on March 8th and extended out until April 16th. Now, this one was at the very beginning of the response to the COVID situation, so somewhat rudimentary. It only covered a few things. It prevented landlords from giving tenants notices for non-payment of rent. It prohibited landlords from giving tenants notices of termination of tenancy. That's basically just your tenancy is terminated at the end of the month. It also prevented the court from issuing these orders and the sheriff from enforcing these kind of eviction orders. There's a lot of gaps that were left in that initial order. So there's a whole universe of different eviction notices that weren't addressed in that first governor's proclamation. There's also, it didn't prevent any landlord from threatening to do these kind of things, even if they knew that they couldn't. And on top of that, there is no mention of what happened to rent payments during this period of time or late fees. Now, on the day before this first proclamation was set to expire, April 17th, so on April 16th, a new proclamation came forth, and this one filled in kind of a lot of the blank spots, the blind spots that were going on there. So this new eviction moratorium or governor's proclamation actually prevents landlords from serving or threatening to serve any type of eviction notice unless that notice shows that the tenant is a threat to the health and safety of other individuals. On top of that, it also addresses the issue of late fees. It also addresses what's going to happen with missing rent payments because of COVID-19, and also reiterates some of the things from before, such as the court still can't order these things, the sheriff cannot enforce them. But it's more rounded out and into an eviction moratorium, basically, at this point.
So since I have you in front of me and in front of our guests, and you are pro bono, I'm going to ask the question: if you cannot pay rent, can landlords add late fees?
So the short answer is no, at least not during the period of the second governor's proclamation. So it's very clear, and this is actually one of the more interesting aspects of the governor's proclamation, is that it states that any late fees associated to non-payment or late payment between February 29th and June 4th, which is when the second proclamation expires, landlords can't charge them at all. So there's not even a requirement that the late payment be due to COVID-19 related reasons. So what we're looking at here in the second proclamation is literally a moratorium on late fees for non-payment or late payment from February 29th through June 4th throughout the state of Washington.
So Mark, let's move forward in time to June 4th, when perhaps the moratorium ends. Will the tenants have a chance to negotiate or set a payment plan with their landlord?
Yeah, so that's a second very interesting aspect of the proclamation. So what it states is that if a tenant cannot pay rent from that period of time, February 29th until June 4th, because of COVID-related reasons, that landlord has to treat that as an uncollectible debt. Uncollectible debt meaning you can't do anything with it. You can't start an eviction process because it wasn't paid. You can't send it to collections. You can't take it out of a tenant security deposit. The one way a landlord can get around that is by offering the tenant an individualized repayment plan based upon the tenant's financial, economic, and health situation. Then, if the tenant fails to comply with that payment plan, then that debt becomes collectible. So what you're looking at is essentially a rent moratorium for a period of time. And in order for the landlord to turn that into a collectible debt, they have to reach out to the tenant and take proactive steps to find out what a tenant's situation is and what kind of payment plan they can pay.
Oh, well said. And Laurie, I'm going to get to you in just a second here. Mark, what do we do, or what would I do if I thought a landlord is doing something illegal?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. So first of all, we're here for anybody that needs legal assistance. That would be your first stop. You could contact us. Laurie's going to have a little bit of information on how to contact Tacoma Pro Bono. There's a lot of organizations right now that are working to help out tenants that are facing any sort of COVID-related legal issues. You could always call 211, which is the same as dialing 911, different digits on your telephone. You could also, the Washington State Attorney General's office is now, their civil rights unit is really ramped up to deal with tenant issues. It's also the Washington State Association for Justice, which is a bunch of trial lawyers, have also pitched in to help out. But we can answer the questions initially or refer somebody out to these different groups if we feel they need to. But contacting us is the first step, and getting legal assistance instead of just tackling it yourself is always going to be your best remedy in the situation.
Oh, I can't imagine, now knowing what we know about this organization, anybody going about it on their own. Laurie, I have had most recently the Crystal Judson Justice Center on. We were talking about the uptick of abuse and reported abuse because of the stay-at-home period right now. So what can people do who are living in an abusive relationship do to get help during this stay-home protection order?
I'm glad you asked. This is something that and I know that you had Crystal Judson on, and I'm really happy you did. I saw that, so it's great. We wanted to say it again. The courts are open. I hear people all the time saying courts are closed. They are not closed. They're getting more open all the time. They're actually doing some family law trials now. So if you are in an abusive situation, you do not have to shelter in place. The courts are open. You can file for an order of protection. You don't have to go anywhere. All you have to do is make a phone call. So to get help, call Crystal Judson at 253-798-4166 or call us directly at 253-572-5134.
I thank you for that, because when I did have Abby McLean on, She opened up a different scenario that many of us are not aware of, and that is that the abuser controlling time, and sometimes the only place they can be is in the grocery store, which is why the Crystal Judson Justice Center is putting up flyers in the grocery store, in the bathrooms. So these poor victims have that 5-minute phone call to make.
Right.
Mark, I want to end with you in these last 2 minutes. What are some of the other issues people are seeing because of the COVID-19 stay-home order?
Well, initially, a lot of the questions we had were about the late payment of rent, the non-payment of rent, and also the late fees. Those were the two hot topic items that we saw for a long period of time. There's still questions that come up about it because not a lot of people are familiar with the second proclamation by the governor and need that further guidance as to how to deal with that particular situation. But some other things we see on a regular basis, including during this COVID time, are things illegal lockouts, meaning the only way a landlord can get a tenant out in Washington state is through a court order, but sometimes landlords take matters into their own hands and literally just change the lock. So we're still seeing a little bit of that. We're seeing questions about a landlord's right to entry, meaning COVID-19 is a very communicable disease and it's transmittable, highly transmittable, and landlords have certain rights of entry, but tenants also have certain rights to limit that entry. And so there's a lot of questions. Do I have to let the landlord into my place to inspect? Do I have to let him in to make repairs? Another big question that we see is leases that are terminating in the middle of this COVID-19 proclamation. So somebody's lease that ends at the end of April, for example, do I have to be out on May 1st? There's a stay-at-home order. It's another question that we could help people out. But we're seeing a whole myriad of different questions that arise, as it does on a daily basis in landlord-tenant issues, and they continue to arise in the COVID situation.
These are, as I say often, these are unprecedented times. And I think a lot of us are learning so much. I mean, this is my first pandemic. I think it's probably the two of you, your first pandemic. So there's so much to learn. We've been showing your website and your telephone number below your beautiful faces. But I want to ask Laurie, I want to ask you this question. Since we're sheltering at home, is the telephone still the best way to get a hold of Tacoma Pro Bono?
Best way to reach us, since we have totally gone virtual. As you know, our attorneys probably love to talk to people in person over anything else, but we have an intake form on our website. All you have to do is click, fill out the form. We will send you an intake form, do some screening, and if you're eligible, we will schedule you to get advice, and that advice will be by phone.
I want to say thank you to both of you so much. Your beautiful capes and your J for Justice on your chest, I can see. And again, thank you so much for removing barriers and for standing in the void for people who can't stand for themselves. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
Well, that wraps up another kitchen edition of CityLine. I think about you all the time. I think about how you're doing with your families, with your neighbors, with each other. And I want you to know this is the first time for all of us in terms of a pandemic. Please be gentle with yourselves. Be patient with each other. Remember to socially distance, but please do not emotionally distance. Wash your hands, and I will see you right back next week in my kitchen here on CityLine. Take care.
Tacoma, that's my home, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home. All right, you're from Chicago, but Tacoma's where you'll stay, yeah. Tacoma, that's my home, from the fine